Good afternoon, everybody. Good afternoon, everyone. I want to thank everybody for coming out this afternoon. I'm Greg Brown. I'm Executive Director of the Kenan Institute of Private Enterprise. It's going to be an exciting afternoon. We've got a great luncheon program and, of course, a great afternoon program as well. Since we launched the North Carolina Investment Forum in the fall of 2017, we've seen a rapidly growing appetite among investors as well as community and government leaders to invest in new ways across our state. So, and I would say particularly in historically overlooked and underserved towns and districts. So I'm excited to discuss with you today what that looks like. I'd like to thank our greatest partner in bringing this group together, Kel Landis of Plexus Capital. Kel's in the process of recovering from surgery and not able to join us today, but he sends his best regards and charged this, as those of you know Kel, this will ring true, to get to work. So, and that we will. With that, it's my pleasure to hand things over to Kel's colleague, Michael Painter, managing partner of Plexus Capital.
Thank you. I'll do my best Kel Landis impersonation. He is a tireless worker and is committed, as you all know, to all things North Carolina, whether it be the school or the state, and has done a lot of great for this state in his lifetime. And I think he's first, I talked to him yesterday, and a lot of you know he is dealing with pretty significant surgery, but the surgery went very well. I talked to him yesterday. He's recovering, and he was not at all disappointed with the outcome of the game last night. So, and neither was I. Sorry, Greg. But I think Kel is a really good example of what we need in our state and in our country. People that are in it for the right reasons, that genuinely care about economic development for the right reasons, and put meaningful amounts of time into giving back to help make that a reality. I worked on Erskine Bowles' first Senate campaign, and he used to say that you have a duty to give back to the community woodpile, and Kel has certainly done that, and as has Administrator McMahon. She is a perfect speaker for us to have here today. She's a native North Carolinian, grew up in New Bern, graduated from ECU. She was also, as you all know, an entrepreneur who grew a business from 13 people to over 800 people that's now a worldwide organization, public entity. And she's now chosen to give her time back at SBA and is making a huge impact. She's now our lead advocate in the United States for the 30 million small businesses across the country, and could think of no better speaker for us to have today. So I want to welcome Administrator McMahon, and we look forward to hearing your thoughts today. Thank you for being here.
Is lunch good? Smells good. I'm going to be envious standing up here while you get to eat lunch, but that's okay. Thanks so much for that kind introduction. I want to thank Kenan Institute for having me here today. Do so much good work here, and it's really, really great for me to be back in my home state of North Carolina. I grew up in New Bern. I went to East Carolina University, graduated from there, and last year, I got to go back and give the commencement address at my alma mater, so that was a ton of fun. And I don't know of anything any more invigorating than to be able to be on a college campus. And we're all young people and minds are thriving, and it's just so great to see all of that. President Trump noted in his State of the Union address that we are, quote, at a moment of unlimited potential in our country. Since his election, America has created 5.3 million jobs, including 600,000 manufacturing jobs. Wages are rising, unemployment is dropping, and our economy is the envy of the world. And I'm proud to say America's 30 million small businesses are the drivers of that economic growth. And I'm their chief advocate in Washington. I take that job very seriously, and it's a great honor for me to be able to do that. Small businesses create 2 out of 3 net new jobs in the private sector. Half of the United States workforce either works for or owns a small business. How many of you in this room are business owners? Good number of you. Thank you for being here today. North Carolina alone has 890,000 small businesses employing about 1.6 million people. That's a lot of families depending on small business success. And I'm happy to share with you a little bit about what's going on in Washington to help small businesses. First off, right now is a terrific time for small businesses. They're feeling confident in the economy and are investing in their businesses. In fact, in surveys done by the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, NFIB, and the National Association of Manufacturers, members report record or near record levels of optimism in the business community. Surveys show consumer confidence was recently at the highest level in almost 18 years. And as head of the SBA, I think there's no better signal of this optimism when entrepreneurs are willing to take risks and start their businesses. Over the past 2 fiscal years, the SBA has provided loan guarantees of more than $60 billion to small businesses, supporting more than 1.2 million jobs. So what's the source of the optimism? I think a lot of it is coming from what the policies are that we're putting in place. President Trump is delivering on his program, his pro-growth agenda. He's an entrepreneur himself, and he's working to make it easier for entrepreneurs to invest in their business and their employees. And when President Trump asked me to take on this job, he said he wanted somebody who had actually grown a business, understood what it was like to sign the front of the check as well as the back of the check, somebody who'd been through some hard times and some ups and downs. The president knows that when small businesses succeed, our economy grows and our nation thrives. So let me outline just 5 pillars with which this administration is supporting small businesses: tax cuts, regulatory rollbacks, workforce development, improved health care coverage, and modernized trade agreements. So tax cuts first. You've heard a lot about those over the past year. In December of 2017, the tax cut bill was signed. And small businesses looking at taking that 20% off of their taxable income even before they are participating in the lower tax rate. But I can tell you what I have personally encountered from small businesses that is part of the tax reduction, and that is the write-off that small businesses can take the year in which they buy it. Now, we've got a 5-year window for them to be able to do that, but to fully be able to write it off, there was a rock climbing company that I visited in Raleigh. And the proprietor told me there, he said, you know, with the tax deductions and some of the appreciation, the write-off that I'm going to be able to take, and they build these pretty elaborate walls, he said, we're going to be able to open a couple of more locations, and I'm going to be able to hire some more people. There was a landscaping company in Jacksonville, Florida, that fellow pointed to a new pickup truck, and he said, you see that truck? That's my tax cut truck. Brand new white pickup truck. He said, I'm going to have more customers, and I've hired 2 more employees. Now, 2 more employees was a 50% increase in his business. There was a baker in Braintree, Mass. Bakes bread for many restaurants all over the country. Trader Joe's is one of them. And he said he was going to be able to buy a new oven, $1.5 million oven, and he already had the customers and the clientele to do that. It was just going to now he'd be able to fulfill it and really grow his business. So the tax cuts and the write-offs have had a big impact on small businesses, and they're investing in hiring more people, and they're investing in more benefits for their companies. And regulatory reform has been a really big boon to small businesses. I know when my husband and I first started our company, it's now a little bigger company than it was then, World Wrestling Entertainment. But Vince and I started sharing a desk in our basement. And we didn't have the wherewithal to have tax accountants and lawyers and a group of regulatory supervisors to show us what we had to do. And that's so often the case with small businesses. You know, they're often the CEO, the receptionist, and sometimes even the janitor before the day is done. So rolling back regulatory reform clearly helps small business. And a stat that I found pretty amazing was that compliance cost for regulation for a small business is about $11,700 per year per employee. That's much higher than the rates that large companies pay. So in this administration, for every new regulation that was promulgated, 12 were eliminated, saving about $33 billion for businesses across the country. So a third area of focus, which I think is probably one area that I hear the most from small businesses, which is really an issue for them, is workforce development, finding the skilled workforce that they need. We are beneficiaries and victims of our wonderful economy, and that we do have a shortage of skilled workforce. The national unemployment rate right now is just 4%, and last week the Bureau of Labor Statistics reported a record high of 7.3 million job openings. The unemployment rates for Hispanics and African Americans have also set record lows, and for women also, the lowest unemployment rates since 1953. Well, it's all great news, but how are we going to fill this pipeline? So the president has signed his apprentice and internship program. We've developed workforce development group, bringing in some of the titans of industry. This is going to require public-private partnerships together, and I have seen it working firsthand. When our community colleges, our technical schools can work with private industry to help design the curriculum for the workforce they need and help put in even some of the equipment. When I'm out traveling like I am today, and I spent the last 20 months traveling the country. I've been to all 50 states. I've visited all 68 of SBA's district offices. And what I hear over and over again is what I just mentioned, workforce development. And when I have seen what community colleges are doing to work and develop this workforce, I was just in a round table this morning where the owner of the company was telling me that he actually goes in. He said, I really don't have a skilled workforce problem because I'm working so closely with the community college that's near me. And I am helping to design the curriculum, putting in the materials and the fabrics. And when those young people are graduating, I have jobs waiting for them. That's the way we're going to help continue to close this gap. And fourth, the president is really working on how to make health care for small business especially more affordable. Association health plans that was just announced last year. Small businesses, and for the first time ever, a sole proprietor can buy into a pool in an association plan to give him or her the same rates as large companies get. This is actually going to help all of our small businesses provide so much more insurance. We've got of the 44 million people who don't have health insurance, 15 million of them are employed by small businesses. So I think this is really going to be a big boon for us. And then the fifth pillar is trade. In November, President Trump signed the U.S.-Mexico-Canada agreement, or the USMCA, which delivers on his promise to modernize and rebalance trade rules to better serve the interests of America's workers and businesses. Incentives that use high-wage manufacturing labor, strengthens labor provisions, and allows for fair trade of American dairy and wheat, and expands market success for American food and agricultural products. And the USMCA includes the strongest intellectual property protections ever negotiated in a trade agreement, securing innovation and trade secrets. And this is really critical in our technically driven world, that we're living in. The USMCA also includes a new chapter on digital trade that supports internet-enabled small businesses and e-commerce exports. Now, what does that mean? It prohibits customs on things like ebooks, video, music, games, and software that are distributed electronically. Many small businesses are in this field. The possibilities for entrepreneurship are endless. And of course, it still has to be ratified by Congress. But simply put, the USMCA will encourage more goods to be produced in the United States. And these new customs and trade rules will make it easier for small businesses to tap into foreign markets. I visited a small company up in Maine, and this company takes, they repurpose sailing vessel sails, the sails that are part of the racing competitions. And they make them into wallets and bags and backpacks and all of that. One of their primary markets was Canada. So the new USMCA rule, when it's in effect, the de minimis provision of that, which means that it will cost less for them in their products that they're shipping, because tariffs aren't going to be imposed on products that are $20 or less Canadian. That's a big help for small businesses. So as the administration works together across all our federal agencies and with Capitol Hill to deliver on these 5 objectives, the SBA remains committed to ensuring that small businesses have a voice in the conversation. SBA is committed to providing the guaranteed capital small businesses need while minimizing programming costs to taxpayers. As stewards of the public trust, the SBA is also responsible for managing risk. I'm committed to continuing our support for SBICs, small business investment companies, which I think are a good part of what this particular group looks at. This SBICs provide capital to companies seeking to scale when it is difficult for them to find money from conventional sources. And I'm proud to say that in terms of private and SBA guaranteed capital, in FY 2018, the SBIC program for the first time surpassed $30 billion. And our combined public and private sources of capital provided about $5.5 billion in financing to more than 1,100 small businesses. We're also examining how we can create demand for SBIC licenses in rural areas and states that don't have SBICs. These small business investment companies, where the company is required to come up with X amount of capital, SBA then underwrites to a tune of about 2 to 1 for those dollars to provide that capital for these investment companies. In FY 2018, the SBA licensed 25 SBICs, which is a 67% increase over fiscal year 2017, and 11 of those were first-time applicants. Here in North Carolina, at the end of FY 18, 9 investment firms controlled 21 active SBICs, which collectively made 72 investments in 28 companies, totaling about $138 million. We want to ensure that SBIC applicants receive their license in a timely manner. I'm pleased to announce that last September, the SBA's Office of Investment and Innovation procured an industry-leading cloud-based productivity software platform that will help us streamline the licensing process and make it more efficient. One of the things you always hear in government is, oh my God, it takes so long to get anything done. Well, it does. But part of what I hope that this new technology is going to provide for our SBIC licensing program is we can actually track how quickly those licenses are going through. And that's going to mean a lot for investment capital coming into small towns, small businesses where they don't exist today. Last October, the SBA partnered with other federal agencies to host 2 events right here at the Keenan Institute. We and the USDA hosted a roundtable at which SBICs and rural business investment companies, or RBICs, the government's full of acronyms, by the way, and I can't keep up with them, could identify barriers to investing in rural areas and find out ways to overcome those barriers. In addition, the SBA, the OCC, FDIC, and Federal Reserve Board held a Community Development Investment Workshop that discussed the Community Reinvestment Act, an important incentive for commercial bank investors. Bottom line, the administration knows how important our nation's 30 million small businesses are. They truly are the engines of our economy. Over half of the United States workforce either owns or works for a small business, and small businesses are creating those new jobs. Government doesn't create the jobs, but we can certainly be hindrances or impediments, and we want not to be that. Small businesses invigorate neighborhoods and cities, making them vibrant places to live, work, and raise a family. In so many ways, they are the glue that holds communities together. I often use the analogy of when you're in a small town, what name do you see on the back of the Little League shirt? Or the local bowling team? Or who supports, the local, pep club at high schools? It's small businesses. They truly are the glue in those neighborhoods. And I saw firsthand how small business and the people in those communities come together when I visited New Bern, my hometown, after Hurricane Florence. A lot of people aren't aware the SBA works with and partners with FEMA and at the state and local levels to assist with economic recovery of declared disaster areas. Typically, SBA guarantees loans that are made. We don't actually make the loan. However, when we go into a community that suffered a disaster, we are the bank for those home mortgages, which SBA never does, and small businesses. We want to get them back on their feet, back in their homes, back in their businesses, because the sooner we make that happen, the sooner that community starts to recover. The SBA helps businesses of all sizes, as well as nonprofits, homeowners, and renters get low-interest loans they need so they can get back on their feet after these disasters. Since Hurricane Florence struck, the SBA has approved almost 11,000 loans in North and South Carolina, totaling $439 million. My visit to New Bern during the storm, and I was able to fly down with the president, landed at Cherry Point, North Carolina, where both my parents were civil service employees. Then I walked streets in New Bern where friends lived, and I had played and saw the damage that the water had done in the storms. It was, when suddenly you're walking in your own communities, it really does make a huge difference. And we stopped at a local cafe for lunch, and one of the few businesses that were open at that particular time. So I asked the waitress if I could see a menu, and she says, well, honey, she says, we're a little short on food. She said, we got three things. We got a hamburger or a cheeseburger or scrambled eggs. Which one would you like to have? And the kitchen was short-staffed because cooks were out taking care of their own homes. But this restaurant didn't have much, but the owners knew they had more than a lot of other people did. In fact, the owner was taking food trucks, and one of the reasons he was running short of food was he was taking supplies from warehouses and driving them out into some of the areas where people couldn't get into where he was. And there were people cleaning up from the hurricane, and they were going to be hungry, and he knew that. They comped a lot of meals that day, but you know what? In tough times, neighborhoods come together and people support each other. I thought that was really a poignant display of how people who had were reaching out to those who didn't have. And I'm so proud to lead an agency that works to ensure that small businesses like that can thrive in their local communities. We at the SBA like to say, we power the American dream. I've lived the American dream. My husband and I started a business sharing a desk in our basement. And yes, our marriage did survive. There were times that it was a little rocky, but it did survive for that. And we grew a business from practically nothing to being a business today that is, I'm proud to say, a global business. It's traded on the New York Stock Exchange. But small businesses need a start. I wish I'd known about SBA when he and I were first starting out. I want to thank today our investors and lending partners who work with us to help entrepreneurs to turn more of their dreams into realities. And thank you for inviting me to share a little bit of your time today and to talk a little about what I'm doing, what the messaging is out of Washington, and how I do think it's such an exciting time to be here and to watch businesses grow and to help them do that. Thank you very, very much for having me here today.
So first, I'd like to thank Administrator McMahon for her remarks today. It's really exciting to hear about what's happening at the federal level and how that's translating into capital formation at the local level. It's really important for the betterment of Americans everywhere. As we heard from Administrator McMahon, the topics we're discussing here today are really of critical importance to our community, to our state, to our nation, really to the world. And there's a growing realization from all parts of the political spectrum that shared economic prosperity is an increasingly elusive goal. While liberal economic policies have consistently attempted to redistribute wealth, conservative economic voices have recently latched onto the fact that typical household in the U.S. has seen very little economic progress recently. So, growing income inequality has really driven American political polarization, as well as increased support for protectionist and anti-immigration policies. And really, it isn't just in the US that this is happening. From Brexit to the Yellow Vest movement in France, differences in economic outcomes are really driving a wedge into society and ultimately society's ability to govern itself effectively. And this risk has been known for a long time, in fact, millennia. If we go back to the first century of the current era, Plutarch noted the risk to society arising from income inequality, stated that an imbalance between rich and poor is the oldest and most fatal ailment of all republics. So the root of this instability is as much social as it is economic. Increasing income inequality is associated with a wide range of ills, including declining lifespans, employment insecurity, and most importantly, lower satisfaction with one's own life. So I'm not here to rain on the parade, but really to share with you more precisely what we see as the problem, and more importantly, what we see as the solution. So first, the problem, income inequality. So in the 3 decades after World War II, the U.S. emerged as the world's leading economic power. This ushered in an extended period of shared prosperity for American households. But by the late 1970s, income growth for many households had slowed to a trickle. So let's see what's been happening and not happening since 1980. So I'm going to show you a few graphs here. So this first line represents the inflation-adjusted income of the bottom quintile of U.S. households. And you can see income's barely grown since 1980. This next line shows growth for the top 5% of U.S. households. It's been trending up, and it's increased quite dramatically the last 5 years or so. We've heard a lot about this dramatic contrast between rich and poor, but that's really only part of the story. What is just as dramatic and really just more troubling is the experience of the middle class. So income for the median U.S. household follows nearly the same flat path as growth for households in the bottom 20%. But here's the most amazing fact to me, something that I actually thought was wrong the first time I calculated it, and really highlights the disconnect between what's happening in our economy and what's happening with most households. If we look at average real GDP growth per capita, the growth rate is even faster than the income in the top 5% of households. So what this means is that the majority of economic growth in the U.S. in the last 30 years has been concentrated in the absolute top income group, so the richest of the rich. And really for all other groups, Even some of those in the top 5%, household income is not growing as quickly as the economy as a whole. So while the economy has grown, those gains have not been shared. So this has some very real implications. If we look at household net worth from 1998 to 2013, the numbers are really quite staggering. Inflation-adjusted wealth has declined for lower class, working class, and middle class households. In the case of working class households, it's declined by more than half. If we look at the top 10% of households, real wealth during the same 15-year period grew 75%. So I think we can all agree that this is a dramatic trend in inequality that constitutes a problem. But there are others as well. We have all heard about the urban-rural divide, and here you can see it in full color. The blue dots are the regions in the country where the economy is growing. As you can see, most growth in the U.S. is clustered around coastal and urban centers. The red dots show economies in decline. The south and rural areas of the country are disproportionately represented. So not only is income inequality a class issue, it's also a community issue. So what can we do? We have a growing list of policies and systems that don't work. We know that aggressive wealth redistribution, socialism, nationalization are all unsustainable solutions. They may make us all equal, but they make us equally poor in the long run. Venezuela is not the example that we want to emulate. But we've also seen that as the premium for skilled labor increases and the benefits of urban agglomeration increase, that a dynamic, open, market-based economy does run the risk, the very real risk, of leaving people behind. So now I'm going to turn things over to the Keene Institute's managing director, Dr. Mark Little, who's going to explain what we believe is a path to the answer.
Thank you, Greg. So what do we need to solve this problem, this issue that's at the root of so many of the problems facing the world today? Well, we need bold new thinking, of course. And so I'm proud to announce a new initiative that the Keene Institute will be launching to help us do just that. So the Institute has brought together leaders from not just the business school here, not just across UNC's campus really, but from across the world to establish the newest economic development initiative we call CREATE. So really what CREATE is, it represents a new model of shared prosperity. Our goal is to rewrite those graphs that Greg just showed to us. So if you remember, he mentioned in his remarks that after World War II, all of our incomes were rising together, and something's happened in the past decades. And so we want to change the trajectory of those lines. We believe that creating equitable growth and shared prosperity will lead to alleviation of many of these issues. So what does this model look like? Well, we believe it lies on a foundation of three things: creating knowledge, creating policy, and creating prosperity. So the first one, creating knowledge. So the Institute and the business schools I've mentioned for the past 3 decades have really excelled in bringing together scholarship and researchers and new data sets and analyzing data to understand what's going on in our economy here in North Carolina and in the U.S. But something that we've done that's, I think, distinguishes us from other business schools across the U.S. and the world is that we're actually on the ground learning from communities and from businesses in some of the most struggling parts of our nation. And so just to give you a few examples of actual things that we're doing currently. So in Sanford, North Carolina, we're working with a company that makes parts for wind power generation globally, but they're based here in Sanford, North Carolina. We've done work in Bertie County where we've worked with the community to help them find ways for the community to actually be an actor itself in its own economic development. So as we know, in many rural areas, a lot of the economic trajectories really has to be changed from people there because some of the things that, because that's really what all those communities have direct control over. We worked in St. Paul's down in the southeastern part of the state, in Robeson County, with a tortilla manufacturer that had the clients to really grow their business but didn't have a way to find that capital, and so we worked with them to do that. And then lastly, we're working in the far western part of the state with the Eastern Bertie Cherokee Indians to help them understand how to bring more people and wealth into that community to help create jobs and businesses there. So we're creating knowledge in all different kinds of ways, not just by data, but also by working on the ground and with real people in real places doing creating businesses and bringing economic development to their communities. Second part is creating policy. So we can pull all the data sets we want together. We can work with as many individual businesses and communities that we can, but we also understand that for things to change, policies needs to change. As Administrator McMahon mentioned, changing those policies is really the only way that you can have an impact across the entire country. So we're doing that by bringing together people on a state level like we're doing here today, but also we are very intentional about working in Raleigh and in DC with policymakers to help them understand what are the things that they can actually do to make a difference on the ground. And then lastly, create prosperity. So this is an outcome of creating knowledge and creating policy. We do this by the actual work that we do in the communities that we're working with, but also as these policies get implemented on a state and national level, then we actually will be able to create prosperity for a larger group of people. So we have a virtuous cycle here of the work that we're doing. And so really, I just want to impress that components of this are things that we have been doing. But what we realized is that for this to really have this impact on a national scale, we really need to be more concerted and do these things together. So with that, I would like to turn it over to Professor Marianne Feldman, who's the faculty director for the new initiative.
For too long, the prevailing wisdom about how to create prosperity has been based on the model of Silicon Valley. This model has proven impossible to replicate, and it's unclear if it's even sustainable there. The Silicon Valley model stresses a winner-take-all mentality that has led to increasing income inequality and the related problems we've been discussing. We need new economic thinking. For 12 years, my research partners and I have studied the industrial genesis of the Research Triangle region. We have studied the ways individual firms and organizations work together to innovate and grow. The Research Triangle is a good counterexample to Silicon Valley. Prosperity has been created through public-private partnerships and the actions of universities, companies, and individuals working together to invest in the region's success. Sound and responsible business practices created opportunities for entrepreneurs and small suppliers. These opportunities allowed workers to upgrade their skills and wages. But we know that the prosperity we have witnessed in the Research Triangle has not extended throughout all parts of North Carolina. Through our NC Growth project, we have been working with communities and with individual companies to understand small and rural economies across the state. So here the red dots are our local community projects, and the blue dots are projects where we are providing technical assistance to companies. North Carolina is a perfect testbed for our research. It's a microcosm of the larger U.S. economy. We have rural areas and urban areas, high tech and agriculture. We have jobs that require advanced degrees and jobs that are available to unskilled workers. Another initiative, Homegrown Tools, extends our work nationally. This project profiles 44 small and medium-sized communities that have pioneered innovative homegrown strategies that capitalize on their unique attributes and have created prosperity in their local economies. Our new CREATE initiative blends academic expertise with practical applied experience. We have a 30-year track record of world-class research and technical assistance, and we tap a well-developed network of experts. We are seeking now to bring cutting-edge analytics to the study and practice of regional economic development. It's a long-term goal, and it's one to which I have dedicated my career. With CREATE, we hope to change the discussion around economic development. We hope to accelerate new firm formation and success. But creating jobs is not enough. We want to create jobs with higher than average wages and also that offer people opportunities, career opportunities. Our ultimate success is going to lie in closing the wealth gap in the communities where we work, but also having our model replicated in communities across the country. The Keenan Institute and Keenan-Flagler Business School are uniquely positioned to fulfill this mission. We are the only top business school with an initiative that engages businesses and communities in economic development. We have a deep appreciation of how the private sector grows, and through our research and partnerships, we're fully engaged in translating that understanding into real-world solutions. We have fostered collaborations with government agencies, nonprofits, and firms. We also work with leading global universities. We are proud of these partnerships as they enable us to significantly expand the scope of our work. But to be successful, we need your help. Please join us in the discussion, advocate for change, become a champion for economic development in your community. As investors, you play a critical role in driving the change we envision. We invite you to join us to create a future of mutual prosperity for our state, our nation, and the world. Thank you.
So we're obviously really excited about the new CREATE initiative. It's, as Mark and Marianne have mentioned, what we're really doing is taking things that have been siloed inside of the Keenan Institute as individual projects or initiatives or grants or research projects and really thinking about what are the synergies between these, how do we learn from these, how do we learn about these in North Carolina, and then how do we turn that into knowledge that's going to be useful to communities across the U.S. So we're very sincere in our invitation for you to join us. There's a lot of opportunity for you to get involved, and if that's something that's interesting to you, please reach out to me or Mark or Marianne or anyone at the Keenan Institute. So thank you for coming to the luncheon. We have another great session, 2 sessions this afternoon. We're going to be upstairs. It's directly above us here, and the way you get there is you go up the stairs that are towards the front, and there'll be people there to direct you to the classroom 204, where we will have our panel sessions, and later this afternoon hear from NC Treasurer Falwell. So we're going to start promptly at 1:30, so take a minute to talk to your neighbor and hit the bathroom, and then we'll get started right at 1:30.